Jeff, I'm coming. Just a second.
Oh, you scared me.
Sorry, buddy.
I was like, oh my gosh, I'm a wuss.
I have to put on my face. No, I'm kidding.
Get that
You
lipstick
remember,
on.
like, there was like my mother. I don't know if my mother's generation was like that.
Oh, my mom spent like 3 hours. She got up at like 5 a.m. and spent like 3 hours in front of the mirror every morning.
And I think that you and I both married women who are very different than that.
Oh yeah, Jen doesn't put
And
on a stitch
thankfully.
of makeup. In fact, when she puts on makeup, I'm like,
Tat's the same way. Oh,
Yeah,
hold on a
that's
second.
incredible.
That video is that video clear?
Yeah, it's crystal clear. You look good,
How many
man.
fingers am I holding up?
14?
Oh man,
No, it's good to see you, man.
it's good to see you too. I mean, I don't know if you're going to share this with everybody, but you really saved my bacon a couple weeks ago by helping out with something at the museum, and
I
we
don't
had
think
so
we
much
did
fun.
It was so much fun. But I mean, I appreciate
was a
your
blast.
gratitude, man. But I mean, it was just as much fun for us as it was for you.
Yeah,
So
I got to describe it to people because I got to give context to this comment. But we're opening up a museum called the Salt Lake Art Museum. It opens up in July, and it's dedicated mostly to Utah art, or to people that were in and out of Utah. And the first major exhibition we're having is on the artist Albert Bierstadt, and we may talk about him someday.
yeah,
Maybe the greatest 19th century landscape painter in the United States. Arguably, could be Church, could be Cole, depending on who you're thinking of. But um, we decided that before we paint the walls for the museum, we just invite a bunch of people to come in and draw all over the walls. But we thought it would be better if we brought in real artists to help with that process and to do their silhouettes. And you and the
you gotta put
entire
that in
Jeff
huge
Atelier.
quotes, huge quotes, because that was so bad.
It was so much fun. It wasn't meant to be like, because it was all like, I mean, yeah, I thought, our first iteration of the idea is let's do like those Disney or State Fair caricatures. Let's get a caricature artist.
Yeah.
I thought, oh man, even caricature artists, if you have to go through 30 people, take forever.
Oh yeah.
You know? And so I didn't want any artist to be put on the spot. So you guys just you came and did a bunch of outlines. I think there were 45 people there, maybe more if you count all, maybe like in the 50s if you count all the like you and my people.
Yeah.
In addition to the people who showed up.
I say at least
Since
that, yeah.
then, we shared a few pictures on social media. We've had twice as many people come to the museum who wanted to draw on the walls on their own
Really?
after the event because they couldn't make it.
No way.
It was really cool. It's been really cool.
So is it just packed full of stuff right now?
It's getting busier all the time. So we've got the mayor of Salt Lake City. I think the governor's even coming by.
Is he?
Yeah, just to get their thing on the wall. And it's a Fox, that are the local Fox 13 news network or ABC affiliate is doing a story where they're coming in and they're getting their crew to do it too. It's funny.
No, I got to meet Governor Cox there and do a caricature of him.
When he comes, I'll
Call
let
me.
you know
Yeah,
when he
yeah.
because I know you two know one another.
Yeah, we do. I would
Yeah,
love to do a
and-
caricature like I did with some of the other people that were there. Some of
Dude,
the,
we had so much
yeah,
fun.
that was great. No, dude, I'm honored you asked me. I think it's so fun to be involved in that. It's
Thanks,
great.
man.
Yeah, it's great.
Well, it's and as we get closer, I mean, I don't know, have you talked much about your museum that you want to eventually have on the podcast?
It's come up here and there. Yeah, the museum.
But I
dedicated
mean,
to
I know
Christ.
that you've got a timeline where it may be a few years until you've got
Yeah,
your
a
thing
few.
set up.
Yeah, a few.
And the attitude of our museum is rising tide lifts all ships, right? So we would love to do a show that talks about your work. And I've even thought about like, wouldn't it be cool to do a student show?
Oh, that'd be great. I've got some great
and
students too.
we should I mean, I know that if my museum team were hearing this, they'd be like, okay, don't get anything on the schedule until we've looked at the whole calendar.
Oh, don't worry. I'm not holding you to anything.
No, but
Don't worry.
we will. It's the funny thing about the great thing about starting a museum is it's like a giant idea board, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have all the bureaucracy at this moment that a lot of people have to deal with because it's kind of like, well, whatever I want to do and can convince the other like five people who are with me
Well, what do
on
you
what
mean
they
the
want to
five
do.
people are with you? Are they not employees or are they boards? Do you have a board already?
So I'm the board director, and then I've got an executive director, Chris Jensen, and then I've got a curator, and I've got an assistant curator,
Yeah,
and
but
I've
those
got
are
a director of
employees.
operations. They are, and I want them all to be excited about what we're doing. And on some cases, they're more excited or less excited about things.
Okay.
And then I've got a couple of donors who've got. I've never really run into opposition.
Yeah.
That's so
That's
so
kind of my
so.
point.
I've never had anybody say, you know, we're going to veto this.
Right.
And you're right. It would get to the point that if I really felt strongly about doing something and they said no, I'd be like, maybe we need to rethink working together. Right?
You just laid it out
Because of that.
there.
Because
Now everyone's gonna be afraid to say no to you.
no, but it's no,
That's
it's
funny.
partially is that I'm kind of I mean it's like anything. I don't want this museum to be a reflection of just my taste,
But
right?
okay,
I
okay.
want it to
Why not
be
though? Because I
well
think what
because
makes this museum great is it is your taste. Dude, you are an asset to this community. If you open it up to other people's tastes, it's just going to run into to be another stupid museum. We've got plenty of those.
well I take that as a huge compliment, and I think that there's a balance, right? Because on one hand, there's the idea of um, I don't want everything to look the same. If we've got five exhibitions going on at one time, I wouldn't want it to all look like my taste. I would love to have some
Yeah, I
surprises.
suppose, but
And
your taste is pretty broad.
but my taste is very broad,
Yeah.
right? And I'm easily convinced of who is it? Our friend Vern Swanson who says I'm easily pleased by the very best.
Yeah,
Right?
that's a
Like
good one. Did he
it's one of
really
those
say
things
that?
that's
That's
like, yeah,
brilliant.
he likes to say that, which is the idea that I'm not. I mean, there's some very experimental stuff that I just love,
Hmm.
right? And I'm fine with it. And then there's just like you say, there is a lot in the in the contemporary art world that is just kind of nonsense,
Yeah,
right? And you know what? For anybody who's listening who thinks that I'm making a broad judgment about aesthetics, that's in any category of art,
yeah.
right? That's in whether we're talking
Oh,
about
there's nonsense in
figurative or
realism too.
abstract or it's this and I probably said this on the podcast before, but if you were to look back at the 19th century, some of the worst art that was ever made in the history of the world was made in the 19th century, right?
Yeah.
And it was made by artists or the students of artists or the friends of artists that we love. The difference is that we've had 100+ years to filter it out and only look at the stuff that's good now. And
Mm.
now if we were to only, and I think, we're probably left with less than 1%,
Wow.
right? And so now we're looking at like all this art that we go to a show and we think like, you and I went to the Portrait Society of America, and if you were to look at the Portrait Society of America and what gets into the contest there and what wins prizes, I mean, just think of 1% of all of those surviving, or maybe even 3%.
Hmm.
That's kind of what's happened in the 19th century, right?
Yeah. Huh.
And that's why I'm not disheartened or too down on art contests when I go to them today. And people say, I only like about 20 or 10% of what was in that show. And I'll be like, yeah, it's probably how it was when you walked into the Paris Salon. You'd probably be like, you know, this wasn't a great year, and every year probably felt that way because you were thinking about
Yeah.
years past and what survived.
That's so interesting. It's not exactly the same, but it's sort of like nostalgia. I mean, I remember when I was in college just wanting to not be there and wanting because
Yeah.
I went to school in Idaho and I'm like, I don't want to be in Idaho right now. I want to go back to New York. And then now I look back and I think, oh man, all I remember is the good stuff. And I think we sort of do that. It's a little bit different because it's about personal experience, but I think we see people of the 19th century and just assume that the whole thing was just booming with great art.
Yeah.
But if you count them, really,
Oh,
there aren't that many.
No, and then there's also another statistic that I love. And this is probably just like a here, this probably isn't a real statistic, but I like it as a rule of thumb.
Okay.
And that's that 70% of an artist's output resembles itself and 30% is experimental.
Hmm.
Meaning that you look at, like, I had this Monet come in a few months ago to the gallery, and it was a city scene that was all in browns, clearly signed, had his labels on the back,
Really?
didn't look anything
Browns?
like a Monet, right?
No
And
joke.
it was an experimental city painting by Monet in browns. And you think, okay, well, that's part of the 30%. It's part of his
Was
experimental
it
output.
washy or was it painted in an impressionist style,
Painted in an impressionist style
but in browns?
in burnt browns. Yeah.
Interesting.
If I could share the show photo with you, I would, because I'm under an NDA for it.
Oh, okay.
Because they're currently dealing with the Monet Foundation for authentication,
Oh,
which
okay.
is a famously difficult place to get anything authenticated. I doubt it'll pass. But
Wait, it
I
won't
think
pass if
that,
it's got a signature right on it?
yeah. Oh my gosh, I've got the greatest Monet story. Do you want to hear
Yeah, of
this? This is
course
the
I do.
greatest Monet story. So listeners will probably hear this story, at least percentage of them, because it was the subject of a show in the UK called Faker Fortune.
Mm-hmm.
So Faker Fortune took up the case of this Egyptian family that had four prime Monets. I mean, we're talking about, like, they're all roughly 28, 34 size canvases, all of lily pads or of his garden in Giverny. And they were bought by the great great grandfather of the family, who was a wealthy Egyptian that resided in Europe about half of the year. So after Monet dies, the Monet family's foundation gets established, and it's run by his children, grandchildren, and great grandchildren. So his son, I think it's his grandson, he's the first appraiser, the first authenticator. And the son of the Egyptian who bought him said, "Hey, we bought these directly. My father bought these directly from your grandfather, Monet. I just really like to get a certificate from you authenticating them." And he got a letter back saying, this is like 1950 something, saying, "Sorry, these aren't by him." He
What?
said, "No. We we bought them. They're signed, and we've got the travel log." He said, "No. I'm sorry. They're not by him." So the
Oh,
Egyptian family didn't kick up a fuss. They just waited for that grandson to pass away and the new person to take over in the 1980s. So in the 1980s, now the great grandson of Monet is in charge, and now the grandson of the Egyptian goes back to him and says, "Hey, we've got these Monets, and by the way, now we have the receipt of with Monet's signature and a letter from him saying that he sold them to our grandfather." And without even looking at the paintings, the new head of the Monet Foundation said, "Sorry, we've already ruled on this in the 1950s. They're not by Monet." So then, fast forward to like 2010, and Faker Fortune takes it up. They put their research team on it. They find not only they have the letter, the receipt, they find Monet's studio book that names the four paintings, their dimensions, their subjects, who they were sold to, and they find a photo of Monet standing next to the Egyptian with all four paintings on the easels behind them for the photo op.
oh my gosh.
They go to the family. The family says, "Sorry, we've ruled on this twice. They're not by Monet." So the Egyptian family sends it to the French Supreme Court. They go through the court system in France, and the court system at the very end, the highest authority says, "We agree with all the evidence. They are clearly by Monet, but we, as the French Supreme Court, are not the authenticating body. So the ruling of the Monet Family Foundation stands."
You're kidding
So
me.
so the four paintings are ruled as not being by Monet, but everybody knows they're by Monet because they went through this television publicity, right? And one of them went up to auction, and instead of selling for like the 50 million or the 40 million that they were supposed to sell for, and only one of them did, it sold for 30 million. So it went for a third less than what it would normally go for.
Why do you think the
But
family
this
was being
is,
so difficult?
I don't know. I went up against the family at an auction in Toulouse in February. I was in Toulouse bidding on a lot of the estate of a man named Theodore Butler, who was an American that married Monet's daughter. He's son-in-law of Monet. And the Monet family was there, and I was outbidding them on everything. And they got really angry with me because they saw some of this as just their right to have it. And I knew their reputation for being difficult. So I said to them, look, um, I want all these things, but maybe there are a few things that are real sentimental value to the family, and I won't bid against you on those if you really want them. And I said, that's a better offer than you'd get from most people. And they said, yeah, oh, okay. But they said, why do you want these? I said, I don't have to explain it to you. I'm just, you know, this is the capitalism, baby. Right? I was like, I'm gonna, if you want them, outbid me,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
we'll see who wants them more. But they're difficult. I don't know what the rational explanation for it is, Jeff. It's a good
Huh.
question, but it's not the first time I've heard that. There's the Picasso Foundation charges a lot of money for things to be authenticated. Some of it is gatekeeping because everybody who goes to a thrift store and finds a Picasso, if everyone sends those
Not you,
to
Mike. Saying shush to my
okay.
son.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. If everyone is going and trying to get their Picasso authenticated, I mean,
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
so
that
many
makes
fakes out
sense. That
there.
makes
It's the
sense.
same thing with Degas.
Do you think they
But
were
you're
holding out
right.
for a bribe or something?
Um,
I mean, you probably can't say, but I mean, it just seems weird.
I don't think so. I don't think they were holding out for a bribe.
Huh.
I just think it was a pride and control thing. That's what I think it was.
I'm trying to imagine
Yeah.
if I was ever that famous and I died, if I would want my family to act like that or just allow my paintings to be moved from place to place the way just naturally, organically. I honestly don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
I wonder how Monet
It's a
feels
good
about it or
it's
would feel
interesting.
about it.
I've talked with some contemporary. I think landscape artists have more of a problem with this. And I don't know,
What do you mean
maybe you
more of a
will
problem?
be,
They,
maybe you will be Rembrandt one day, but I'll tell you what I mean by that is that, for instance, let's take, you know, the amount of time it takes you to do one figurative painting versus a Josh Clare or a Kimball Geisler or a Brian
oh,
Taylor.
right.
They will do 30 or 40 paintings. So you're doing all of these, they're doing, you know, way more work by the numbers than you are. And that also means more experimentation. And I have one uh contemporary landscape painter I know who's actively collecting his early pieces and destroying them
What?
because they don't look anything like his later pieces and he doesn't like them at all. And I told him, I said, if I'm ever going to do a show on you, I want you to preserve at least a few examples. But there's a really good example of that being a
You don't
good
have to
case
say
too.
his name,
Like,
but do I know this artist?
yeah.
Huh.
But for instance, there's like Aubrey Beardsley, who died in his late
Yeah.
20s. He was a famous illustrator. He did a lot of Oscar Wilde's illustrations and a lot of Art Nouveau, Art Nouveau pieces and arts and crafts. He had a deathbed conversion to Catholicism. And he told his friend on his deathbed, I want you to destroy all of my pornographic drawings, which are
Yeah.
private. I haven't shared them with anybody, but I've got them in this
Yeah.
this
You've
drawer.
mentioned this before.
And his friend didn't destroy him. And Aubrey Beardsley was known as a pornographer for much of his life and not for the stuff that he had public. So
Ouch.
I do think there is something to the idea of controlling your own image as an artist.
Mm-hmm.
But what you're bringing up and what I'm bringing up is probably different than that, which is let's look at Rembrandt. At one point, Rembrandt had 15,000 works attributed to him.
Holy
And
crap.
it couldn't have been possible. And there was this
No.
board, and I met several of the members on the board. There were how many paintings did Rembrandt paint? They've whittled it down to 300, between 300 and 350 paintings, and 300 etchings, and 1,500 to 2,000 drawings. But they had 15,000 paintings. So they've whittled down 15,000 paintings to 350 paintings, roughly.
That's insane.
Because there was such an attribution problem. And this group has been at it for 40 years trying to say, okay, what are the criteria? And even now, they've got the numbers between 300 and 350 because 50 are in dispute.
So what I'm assuming the 15,000, they all must have had a signature. I mean, why were they even attributed in the first place?
This is from an era where no signatures took place.
Rembrandt
right?
never signed his
So there-
paintings?
I don't believe he did. I don't think that the 17th century was, that really didn't happen until 18th century and later. So this is about
Whoa, I didn't
100
know
years
that.
beforehand, right?
Wow.
And he was, he was still prolific because he did a lot of etchings. He did a lot of, that were all distributed. And how do you, I mean, if someone were to say to you right after you died, okay, Jeff, did you do 150 paintings or
Oh
250
gosh, I wouldn't know right now
paintings?
how many I've done.
It's harder than you think to know how
I
many
haven't.
paintings
You
an
asked
artist
me
did.
recently if I cataloged my work, and that kind of freaked me out. I've been thinking about it ever since. I have no record of anything I've painted, except right here.
Oh, you've got some record. There are records.
Well, I
There's,
mean,
like,
I don't have it like
online
in a
and things like that.
spreadsheet. I've got digital files of a
Yeah.
lot of it. But take my plein air landscapes. I've done dozens and dozens and dozens, maybe hundreds. And they just come and go. I never sign them, never photograph them, give them away, sell some.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
mean, they all have my signature, so that's something, obviously.
I've got a
But-
Jeff Hein at my house.
Wait, you do?
I do. I bought it from an artist after he passed away.
What is it? Which one is it?
It's the older woman who's clutching her it's a headshot. I'll send you a picture of it.
I don't even remember what you're talking about. That's funny.
Yeah, I'll
Is
send
it
it to you.
pretty
It's-
old?
So it's, you've got a woman with gray hair that's on your website
Yeah.
who's kind of got her hands underneath her chin.
Yeah. It's her
I've got
again?
one of the versions of that.
You do?
Yeah.
Why? How come you never told me that?
I did.
Did you? Oh man, my memory
I told
is
you the
terrible.
day I bought it. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah.
brother. How long ago was this?
Yeah. Oh, it must have been 5, 6 years ago.
Oh,
I was in
funny.
another state.
Well, hey, I'm glad you have
Yeah.
it. That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. I'll sell it back to you for a great price.
No, I don't
No,
want
I'm
it.
kidding.
I don't want my
No,
own
no, no.
work.
But it is one of those things that, like, so in the 19th century, every artist had the practice of having a studio book. It was
Yeah.
just like a ledger, right? And every time they finished a work, they would just, put the title down, the dimensions, and maybe they put who they sold it to and what they sold it for. And I think that, I mean, I don't know if you've got this too, but like, we're old. For people who are listening, we are old. I remember in college, I was still using an electronic typewriter for some of my papers. Right.
Yeah, yeah.
But I've also got from high school and college, like old floppy disks or hard disks. And those are things I never look at. And when I wrote the Dictionary of Utah Fine Artists and I did 800 biographies of artists,
Mhm.
about 400 of those were living artists. And out of those 400, I would say that 200 of them were in their 70s and 80s. And some of them had dementia.
Wow.
And many of them had websites that they hadn't paid the hosting fees for 10 years, and they were in Flash. And so they weren't even archived. And so they had no record of what their work was on their website even. And this was, so I'm really an advocate of having a physical just book of some kind,
I'm gonna start doing
even if
that.
you just print it out. And every artist who's listening, especially the women, write your own obituary.
Why the women?
That sounds crazy. Well, because I would find with women after they died that one of the most, so newspapers have largely stopped covering artists.
Yeah.
That's just a sad fact, right?
Yeah.
Which is one reason I'm doing Bearded Roman again. I'm going to keep writing about artists, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Wait, share that. So
um,
beardedroman.com.
beardedroman.com. It's a blog that I had that was very popular from like 2005 to 2013, and it's how I developed relationships with everybody from like James Gurney to Jacob Collins to Michelangelo to Michael Graves, and then I just stopped writing on it. And when I went to the Portrait Society, people brought it up who were in their 20s. I was like, what? I
That's
guess I had better,
crazy.
and I have a responsibility. But I remember I've started writing more about artists. But the reason I say about women is that the way that you get written about often as an artist is in your obituary. And the difference between men's and women's obituaries is dramatic. So when I would have a man who would have an obituary would usually say, grandpa studied at University of Utah and he studied in Idaho and he had this atelier and it would be your biography, right? And he was a regular member of the Portrait Society faculty. But if the woman's biography is being done, it would be grandma loved to spend time with her kids and she served in her church and she made the best cookies and we have the greatest memories of grandma. And then I would look into
Oh
the
man.
grandmother's newspaper accounts of her that had been written over the years, and I would find out, oh, she went to the Art Institute of Chicago. Oh, she taught at the Art Students League. Oh, this. Women don't get talked about in professional ways usually. It's
Interesting.
still a
Yeah.
thing, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that women in particular, but all artists should be writing their own obituary the way that they want it to be said.
That
So
sounds
that
so funny.
because your kids and grandkids don't think of you as a professional first. They think of you as grandma or dad or mom,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Or they think of you as uncle or aunt. And so you have the responsibility, unfortunately, to do that work. Because as an art historian, I will try and do that work for you. I'll try and do it,
Yeah.
right? But I'm not going to be able to get to everybody. And that's the failure of the art community isn't writing enough about artists. And so it's your job as an artist to fill in our responsibility a little bit.
No, I'm gonna have to do that one in
But
secret because my wife. Well, if even if I did it in secret, if I die before her and I leave a written obituary that I wrote, the first thing she'll do is put the first line. My pretentious husband wrote his own obituary. Here it is. I pretty much guarantee it.
yeah,
So it's a lose-lose for me,
yeah.
man.
I'll write it for you.
Thanks, dude.
I'll get when it gets there. I'll write.
Okay, I
I'll write.
appreciate
I'll
it.
write the art parts. You people can
My
write.
pretentious
Your family can
husband
write the
had
other
his
parts.
friend Micah write his obituary. I can't win.
We all need a Jen in our
I
lives.
know. I know.
It's
She's so funny.
I forget what the figure was in ancient Rome, who anytime an emperor would be on parade, there was a figure there was a slave that's job it was to stand next to them and whisper in their ear at regular intervals, "You are not immortal. You are not immortal. You are not
Yeah,
immortal."
that's her job.
Yeah,
That's too funny. Dude, that's a cool
yeah,
cup. Show me
yeah.
that cup. That's pretty sick.
It's
Where'd you get that?
it was done. It's done by a company called um Ginori, and it's Italian, and it's all of the it's a reference to the obelisks in Rome.
That's cool.
But it's funny, like because I'm in an antique and art gallery, just things walk through the door, and I'll have like a different yerba mate cup every month. You've probably
You just
noticed.
pull an antique off the
Yeah.
one and pour some
I just do.
latte
I'll
in
do
it.
it sometimes. Yeah. You want to see the most elaborate one?
Yeah,
Okay.
let's see
Before
it.
we get into our subject, this one I just acquired for my collection. This was made of sterling silver in,
Holy crap. Wait, does the cup sit
yeah.
on top or you have to drink with the whole thing?
Yeah.
No, no, no.
No,
What
you
I
have
mean
to
is
hold it.
you have to hold
You're
the whole
supposed to
thing.
hold it like this.
Stop. Are
Yeah,
you
isn't that
messing with me?
crazy?
You're messing with me.
No, I'm not. I mean, there are less elaborate ones that are also old. This is,
That's crazy.
dude, I
for-
get into so many
That's so cool.
collecting
For anyone that
obsessions.
ever comes to Salt Lake, you have to visit Anthony. Your place is the coolest. See, every year,
thanks, buddy.
every year when I bring my students there, that's all they talk about. That because it's not a typical gallery or antique shop. It's very, very unique. You guys have cool stuff there.
Oh, thanks, buddy. Thanks,
Yeah.
buddy.
All right. So
So
what are we
here,
talking about today?
here should let me give you, this is what you and I are going to do.
Okay.
And I don't know how far we're going to get. When
Yeah, you've got a boatload
you
of
would-
images here.
you would pitch to the idea, you would pitch to the idea to the Portrait Society of America that maybe I'd be a good speaker for one of their events. And so we talked to them, and they said, well, hey, Micah, why don't you do something on the history of portraiture? You're an art historian. I don't know if they've ever had an art historian speak. They usually have artists.
Not broadly. They've
And
had ones that focus on particular artists. That's about as close as they've gotten.
So I thought it'd be fun. I've never seen anybody do this. Do a history of portraiture from Raphael in the late 15th century all the way up to Joaquin Sorolla. And I didn't realize that we only had an hour. I don't think you realized either.
Dude, that
'cause
was
usually you and I
brutal.
get to
That
talk
was
as much
so
as we were.
rushed.
So we had I narrowed down what are like 96 images to 15 images, and 15 images was too much.
Mhm.
And I don't think today we're going to get to all of these images that I've got. There's no way we'd be here for 6 hours.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot.
But what we did is we just talked about how portraiture changed over time as a technology and with the tools, materials, methods that were available, but also just the choices of what people wanted in portraiture over
Mhm.
time. And I may write a paper for a major publication on this because I feel like it's a fascinating topic. And I didn't realize until you and I talked how fascinating it was. I think for anybody who wants to go hear our conversation, we had a lot of fun at the Portrait Society.
That was so much
If
fun.
you're a member of the Portrait Society, go do it. It's behind a paywall, I think.
Mhm.
This one is going to be different than what we did at the Portrait Society, but we're going to cover some of the same topics.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. I'm excited. Yeah, that
Any,
was so
anything
much
you
fun,
wanted
but it
to
felt
add to that?
so rough. It felt so
did.
rushed. I mean, at the end, it was a marathon. It was like both of us, mostly you, had to talk at double speed. 1 hour was so short, and we had to leave time for questions. So it was really only like 45 minutes.
I'm going to cheat a little bit,
Okay.
like I did at the presentation, and we're going to start with not Raphael, but just before Raphael.
Okay.
So the first image is by Ghirlandaio. Ghirlandaio was a Florentine artist, and Ghirlandaio was considered one of the greatest artists of his generation. And he's working in egg tempera or tempera.
Okay.
I've heard it pronounced both ways. Tempera is probably, I mean, we won't get stuck on pronunciation. But the difference between tempera and oil, for those who aren't familiar with them, just on a basic level, is that you're using the yolk of an egg, and that dries as a solid opaque layer. So you can't layer like you can with oil painting different colors and get glazes and mixing, visual mixing of color.
Mhm.
What you see is what you get. The benefits of this system are that it's extremely stable. Oil painting isn't always stable. It can change color over time. Tempera does not change over time.
Really? I didn't know that.
It's like, I mean, it's almost like the acrylic of the era, right? Where it's such a solid plastic form. And it's also aided by the fact that in Florence, they have maybe 28 pigments they're using. That's it. And out of the 28, about 10 of them are mineral. And those minerals do not change over time.
That's what I was going to
they're the
ask,
kind of thing
because it's the pigment that's fugitive, not the medium. So they were using
usually.
Okay, so it is
Usually, I mean, you can get a vegetable tempera that doesn't really change over
Right.
time too.
Really?
But with oil, if you use a vegetable or like a kind of like a plant-based pigment, organic of any kind, and it's not fully saturated with the oil, then that exposed to oxygen will rust It'll oxygenate.
Oh, no kidding. I didn't know that.
But it won't happen as much with tempera. So here's this portrait, at a distance, at a big glance, it looks very wooden. But let's look at what it looks like up close. Up close, you can see just very tiny strokes, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you could even zoom in on this even more, and you could see just how he has to paint with a 3-hair brush on some of these. And he has to do a little lighter, a little darker, a little lighter, a little darker. And then sometimes he'll have kind of like big strokes that go on top of that. But none of this is mixing of colors. This is all like paint by number, but like by paint by decimal point.
Yeah,
Right?
and there's a
It's
lot of
just
optical
tiny,
mixing. Look at
tiny.
the greens next to the reds, next to the beige.
It's the only way he could achieve the color. And at a distance, it looks very wooden,
Yeah.
um, compared to what we're used to.
But that's an
I mean,
issue of
zoom in on
drawing.
her
That's an issue of drawing as much as anything else.
and zoom in on her neck or even on her clothing, anywhere on the bigger one.
Okay.
Because it's a pretty high resolution image. You can do
Oh, yeah,
a
that's
pretty good job on
nice.
this one. And you can see all the tiny strokes. I mean, it almost looks.
Hatching.
And that is where you really appreciate how he's transitioned the values from the lights to the darks, the warms to the cools. But he's doing that all with tiny, tiny brushstrokes. It's super hard to do. So you
Wow.
you got to realize that when we're dealing with this technology of just working with tempera, you're dealing with a limited ability to, on a technological level, of what's available to you as an artist.
Man, those colors are
And if
still really saturated.
isn't that fantastic? And that's the advantage of tempera, is that
Wow.
you get very saturated colors. Now, fast forward 20 years later, 30 years later, and you're dealing with Raphael. And Raphael is one of the first Florentine painters who's really using oil. This is a mix of oil and tempera, but the tempera is largely used for the highlights. So when you see on the posts of that chair or the tassels, those kind of more solid strokes, some of them are tempera, not all of them. This has been very tested. But this is a portrait of Pope Julius II. He was the great patron pope of Michelangelo and Raphael. He's the one who commissioned the Sistine Chapel. He's the and when this portrait was done, Vasari, who was the first biographer of many of these artists, said that people were terrified because it felt like he was alive. And
Huh.
you can imagine that the difference between seeing Ghirlandaio's portrait of the girl that we just saw versus this one, the liveliness of this
Yeah.
it's so much more organic.
Oh, yeah.
And that's just a 30-year change. It's like I compare it when I talk to people, the difference between claymation that you and I grew up with that made dinosaurs in movies, that was stop motion claymation, versus Jurassic Park CGI.
Oh,
The
yeah. That I was thinking the
claymation blew
same thing.
people.
Yeah.
It's like if you saw the claymation and you'd never seen a movie before, you would think, wow, that claymation's amazing. But then the moment you see Jurassic Park, you think, oh my gosh, like that claymation doesn't look realistic at all.
Do you remember the Land Before, or was it Land Before Time, or the
Yeah.
with those weird alien people? And I just remember
Yes, I
I
do.
saw it recently on YouTube, an episode of it, and it was crazy crude. And I remember as a little kid watching that and being totally okay with how rudimentary it was.
I mean that I think is exactly how these people felt when oil painting came to in the late, 1470s to 1490s. It really didn't get adopted until like 20 or 30 years later because they didn't know how to paint with it. They didn't know, like, how do you mix things? How do you layer things? I mean, what do you do with this? And Raphael was the one who kind of showed the way to a generation. He was so important that his way of layering works, with oil paint, became the standard in Italy, and then was transferred to other countries as they adopted the Italian way.
Hmm.
And I think that it's zero in on his fingers and look at the jewels for a moment. that he did. This gets mentioned all the time by contemporaries, how he was able to get actual reflections. Those reflections, I believe, are tempera, the
So
white
tempera sticks to the top
reflections.
of oil?
I guess. Yeah. I mean, I'm not the greatest materially on how these work as a conservator,
Hmm.
but for the longest time in Italy, well into like the late 1500s, 100 years after oil was introduced, they're still trying to use the strengths of tempera because of its saturation and its solidity.
Hmm.
So where we would now call this dead color, or like, just like a solid, um, you know, almost out of the tube color going
Yeah.
on the top of something sometimes. They would just use tempera instead because
Hmm.
they felt like it was more effective.
This episode is brought to you in part by Rosemary Brushes. If you're one of my listeners who's a professional artist, you're already using Rosemary Brushes. But for the rest of you, come on. Take your work a little more seriously. Stop buying the other brands. It's just not worth it. Every now and then you may get lucky and buy a good brush from another brand, but use the brand that professionals like myself are using. Go to rosemaryandco.com, link in the description or the show notes, and get yourself some quality brushes before your next painting.
So I'm going to tell everybody a crazy story that's going to blow their minds, and they're going to think I'm lying.
Okay.
If you were in Italy and you were a painter, you were part of the Guild of St. Luke. And that was because Luke was considered the first artist in Christendom. He who wrote the gospel. He supposedly painted the Savior and Jesus Christ and Mary. And there was your only job was to was to paint.
Mm-hmm.
Then there was a gilding guild that did the gilding of paintings. So if you had any gold in it, and then there was a panel guild that did just the supports. That were almost always in Italy oak or pine. Sometimes they'd be walnut, and they would do it in pine, and then they would gesso it and they would sand it down, and you'd get it delivered. As an artist, you were not legally allowed to make your own panels. You had to order them from the guild that did those panels.
Really? Huh, okay.
So Titian, and that's why, if you can't do panels very well in large scale. And that's why you have to do, as an artist, you have to do if you're going to do a large scale, you would do a mural that would usually be, oh, what's the word I'm looking for? It's gesso, and you'd paint it on a wall. And it's what the
Fresco.
Sistine Chapel and fresco. You do fresco. And frescoes would dry very quickly. And it was very hard to do one because you'd have to do them in sections that they called giornatas, which just meant a day at a time. And it was really hard to work in those. And Titian had a brilliant idea. Titian was working out of Venice, and Venice is a marine power. Italy is broken up into several kingdoms, and Venice is the biggest sea power in all of Europe at the time. And he goes to the sailmakers and he says, I'm doing a big commission. I think it was the Education of the Virgin. It's a painting that I'll show, and I showed on our discussion about Titian. And he said, I want you to make me a sail, and I'm going to paint on that. We're going to gesso and sand down the sail, just like we would a panel. And we'll use that. And that is how the canvas was invented. That's how painting canvases were invented.
Yeah.
Titian and Venice did it.
Yeah, I've heard
So
that.
we're talking a new technology here, right? And Titian is also a native oil painter. He's not a native tempera painter. He grows up in the first generation that's really using oil. This is a very large scale portrait of Carlos the Fifth of Spain.
Is it
And
bigger than life?
we know that it's bigger than life. It's about 12 feet tall. And it's the scale that is an innovation because of the canvas that he's working on. But it's also that the oil paint is caked on. He's got impasto in this. Titian, unlike Raphael, is using oil paint almost in a sculptural way, like he's building up sections. So if you zoom in on that armor,
That's as far as I can go.
and I think if that armor is incredibly built up with a kind of what's the word we'd use the word impasto today.
Yeah.
And he's also putting, for the first time really, these figures in three-dimensional space. So instead of doing a three-quarter profile or somebody who's sitting on a chair with kind of an a non-existent background or drapery behind him, Titian is putting him on a horse, and he's putting him with a landscape in the background. And he's got all of these elements that have just come together in a few years, right? Oil paint, canvases, landscape, animals. He's got all of it going together in one portrait. This blows everyone's mind at the time. And it becomes, for the next 150 years, the basis for all portraits that are done of kings and queens and portraits of power. It is seen as being this, and the scale is really the thing that shocks people. You're now seeing a painting that looks lifelike, just like the Raphael. So it's shocking that it's lifelike, but add to that it's bigger than life.
He must
And
have
they're
felt
thinking,
like a
"Oh my
magician back then, because people were so floored by this.
People could not believe it. They could not believe it. Titian painted well into his 80s. He was busy all the time. People wanted lifelike portraits in large scale done and it was almost like he made people look like they were moving. It doesn't look as shocking to us, but the fact that that horse is rearing up a little bit,
Well, yeah, these
blew
people
people's
aren't
minds.
worth to seeing imagery of anything, really. And I mean,
No.
there's some imagery, of course, but it's more, I don't know, more folky, more crude. And then to
Okay,
see
so
something
now
so
I gotta-
lifelike, oh my gosh.
I got to show you something that was done at the same time. So Carlos V had a terrific sculptor who he worked with, and he had this larger than life size portrait of him thrusting down the Furies out of hell. So he was the great
This is bigger
emperor
than life?
of a little bigger than life. It's only about 15% bigger than life.
Wow.
And it's in the Prado. And don't click on the next one yet. He was made the first Holy Roman Emperor by the Pope in order to face the Ottoman Turkish threat that was trying to invade Europe at the time. So all the Christian armies in Europe were behind Carlos V of Spain, who was then called Emperor Carlos.
Mhm.
And this is him symbolically thrusting out the Turks. This is what's crazy, is that the sculptor who did this made the armor so it could be taken off.
No way.
Look at the next image.
Whoa.
It is the same sculpture with the armor that can be taken off.
That is too freaking cool.
Put them side by side.
That's brilliant.
Isn't that one of the most unbelievable things you've ever seen in your life?
Oh my gosh. Has that ever been done again to your
I
knowledge?
have never seen its equivalent in the history of art. It's by an artist named Pompeo Leone, and he worked almost
Wow.
exclusively he was Italian. He was an amazing sculptor, and it fits into this discussion of portraiture because kings wanted to be shown in almost at this time a Roman sculptural way. They're digging up sculptures all over Europe at this point that are done by the Romans, and that's what the intention of this was to make him look like a Roman god. And
Amazing.
can you imagine a king or a queen wanting to be nude in a portrait today? And they
Well,
have
if
it on
if you were-
display.
if you were portrayed in a body like that, yeah, heck yeah.
Well, and that's obviously not what he really looked like, right? I mean, this is obviously an idealized version of him.
Right.
But to me, like, this is the ultimate, like, bragging piece.
Wow.
So he has Titian painting him as an enormous, like, bigger than life figure. And
Oh,
he
that's
has
the
Leone,
same dude?
and it's same figure. It's the same. And you can see it on the horse. So if you put,
Wow.
if you,
Oh,
if,
that's
you know,
good.
I
That'll be
wish
a
we
little
had it
tougher,
side
but
by
let me.
side.
No, I'm going to pull it up again. Hold on.
When you enter on the entrance that's to the
I
the
lost
second
it.
level of the Prado, you're greeted by this sculpture, and it's usually in the nude. They
Dude,
keep
yeah,
it
that's
mostly in the nude.
nuts. I lost the other one. Sorry, man. But I just got to remember.
That's all right.
That's
So,
unbelievable.
so-
What a cool idea.
the Renaissance portraiture really takes off because you've got the first full-size sculptures are being done after they've seen the Greco-Roman pieces, and this really is in the spirit of Greek and Roman sculpture at the time. You've got the new technology of oil that's going on, and most of the portraiture that's going on in the Renaissance is of kings and queens and popes. But there's a small pocket of people that start doing intellectuals, and they like the next guy I'm going to show you is someone who was not he was a minor artist. His name is Moroni as an artist,
Ooh, that's
and he's
beautiful.
kind of doing merchants at his time.
Hmm.
And he's been quote unquote rediscovered in the past 30 years because he's working um in the non
Painting for the middle
international
class.
art market. He's painting for the middle class. And Moroni um
God, I think he's good. What was
he's so
who
good.
were his
His name is-
contemporaries?
He was a contemporary of Titian.
He's better than Titian, in my
Tintoretto.
opinion.
And a lot of people think that. You're not the only one to think that. But because he wasn't working in a large crowd and he's doing these smaller, he's not painting major figures. His work doesn't get distributed. And it's really not
Wow.
until, the 19th, the 20th century when people start going. But this is what oil painting makes possible,
That's
frankly.
incredible.
And what art education makes possible is that everybody's taste goes better. Now, this is all in Italy. The thing that you and I didn't just talk about, and we didn't really get to talk about a lot in the Portrait Society, is the next artist, who's Hans Holbein. And Holbein is working in the North, where they've had oil painting for 40 and 50 years longer than they did in Italy. And he's painting a little later than Raphael, but his confidence in using oil is, I would argue, much higher than Raphael's.
Yeah.
I mean, he's able to get this kind of realism, this naturalism that almost looks like what we would be looking at in the 19th century with their level of confidence in using and layering colors and getting textures. I mean, just what he's doing is unbelievable.
He's almost a hyper realist in some areas. Look at that finger.
It does feel like hyper realism, and we will spend an entire time talking about Holbein. The one thing I want us to get from this is that Italy becomes the model for much of Europe, but what they're doing in Northern Europe, because they have oils 50 years longer than they do in Italy, they've got a confidence with oil painting that predates and that makes them light years ahead in some ways of what's going on in Italy. They're not always doing better work, but it's remarkable, isn't it? I mean, you look at this and you think, okay, this is happening in like the early 1520s and 30s. It's incredible.
It's just so quick.
What were
I
you
mean, I'm
saying?
looking at the edge of the lips and how he turns the lip. One of the most common errors with amateur painters is making the edges of features too hard and not letting it be a continuation of the facial form. And yet, oil painting is relatively new, and he's already got this stuff down. It's just, it's like it was just instinctual for him and others like him. It's amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing, isn't it?
Isn't this in the Frick in New York?
That is in the Frick in New York.
Yeah, I remember seeing it there. Yeah, it's even better in person,
Yeah.
of course.
Yeah, it is in the Frick. So now I want to talk about, skip 3 images ahead. We're going to talk about Velasquez. Now, Velasquez was, in my opinion, he was hired to basically do portraiture. His job was to help the king project his power, number one, and number two, to get the king's children married by making portraits that would be sent out to other courts as advertising and propaganda of why you should marry these beautiful children.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's I mean, imagine an era when it's your job to secure the future of the kingdom through marriage. The court painter automatically takes on the job of it's very important, the portraits that are being made
So
of your children.
this is basically a sales pitch to another royal woman saying, "Hey,
This one,
here's what you could have."
this one was, yeah, because I mean, he was unmarried for a long time, Philip the Fourth, and he was very good friends with Velasquez. And this piece, I believe, is in the I think this is in the Frick. Velasquez only does 120 paintings, depending on how you count them. Go look at the textures in his clothing that he did, and if you want to see what Velasquez was up against, look at the painting right before this side by side, which is the other court painter who was painting Philip at the same time that
Oh,
Velasquez was working with,
sheesh.
right?
I'm gonna
So
turn that.
Velasquez was working with an artist who was actually, I mean, there are a lot of things that are good about this when it comes to over the top monumental armor. It's very impressive. It's a large scale piece. Realism was not, and naturalism was not valued at before Velasquez came into the court. And then Velasquez comes in and he paints things in a naturalistic way. It's night and day, the difference. And the difference isn't, I mean, if you put them side by side again,
They both got good likenesses. Well, you would assume because
they
they're
both get good
recognizable.
likenesses. I mean, and one's a little younger. The one on the right is a younger Felipe. The one on the left is older Felipe. But you know, you can't say that the guy on the right didn't know how to manipulate the armor and make it look like realistic armor. And to do a lot of it is it's kind of mind-boggling to us, but they're both competent painters in oil.
Yeah.
But there are choices being made. I mean, obviously Velasquez is way more confident when it comes to the face and
Well,
but
that's the
thing that
hardest part, though.
Velasquez,
The armor's impressive.
that is
but-
the hardest part.
But it's just tedious
You're right.
more than skill relative to the head, I would say.
Velasquez, and you and I have talked about this before, had an ability to know when to leave something alone, to leave the edges undone,
Yeah.
to leave to not draw a solid line when a loose edge would do better,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or and that makes all the difference in the world. And if you were to, I want to draw a comparison here. One image before this is Velasquez's image of the Pope, and he's looking at Raphael. So I want you to put this Velasquez next to the Raphael Pope, I mean, that we had earlier, the third image. So
Oh yeah,
take
yeah,
the,
yeah. All right, I know what you mean.
so
I know what
take
you
these
mean. So let
other
me get
two
rid of
away,
these.
and then look at
And then here.
that, and that's
Oh
100
my
years of oil painting.
gosh. Look
It's
at
100
the
years of difference.
Wow.
And
Amazing.
I'll say the one on the left is a little yellowed, and so I think that they haven't been able to restore it to its original colors, so it's shifted a little bit. But you can still
Man.
see what 100 years of oil painting has done. I think that the Velasquez, there's a lot more confidence in the material use of paint.
And is it 100 years? Is it regional too, though? I mean, Velasquez being Spanish.
It's
and-
also, you could argue that, you know, Velasquez is looking at different things. He obviously admires Raphael. He's looking at the original Raphael
Mhm.
when he paints the portrait of the new Pope. And he's almost in a way taking on Raphael.
Yeah, the
as an
composition's
artist.
almost identical.
I mean, everyone who saw it knew the Raphael and knew Velasquez was taking it on.
Yeah, he wiped the floor with it.
And some of it is just like the difference between, I mean, it's like if you look at Peter Jackson's King Kong versus the King Kong that was done like in the 1930s.
Yeah.
Like Peter Jackson, I mean, like there are, it's also a question of what's available to you. I mean, Velasquez is 100+ year native of oil painting at this point, right?
What kind of blows my mind is how quickly they went away from showing off. You know, because when oil painting was new, it seems natural that artists would push it to its absolute, the edge of its capacity to describe form. So they're just, you know, every detail on the rings painted in there, every wrinkle on that lower garment, that white garment, Raphael painted in there. And only 100 years later, they've already figured out that that doesn't need to be done. And they've kind of stopped showing off a little bit in a way.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not suggesting
Yeah.
Raphael was only showing off, but he has this new magical medium that everyone's so floored by. They're literally frightened of how realistic it is. So it makes sense he'd be tempted to just push it to its limit. And just 100 years
Yeah.
later, they're just making big, broad, sweeping strokes and better paintings with it.
When I was, I interviewed Antonio Lopez Garcia, the Spanish painter, in 2015 in his studio with Peter Trippi, who's the editor of Fine Art Connoisseur magazine. And I got there a little earlier than Peter and was in Antonio Lopez's studio. And he had 3 little like postcards on the wall of other artists. One of them was Sorolla. And it was a portrait by Sorolla. Another one was Christina's World by Andrew Wyeth. And the other one was a Velasquez. 3 artists. I mean,
2
Wyeth,
Spanish
Velasquez,
and 1 American.
Sorolla.
I'm glad he got an American in there.
Yeah, and I asked him. I said, "What is it you love about each one of them?" And he said about Velasquez, he said Velasquez knew when to stop. He was the most restrained of painters, and it goes exactly to your point of the one of the things that makes Velasquez one of the greatest portraitists of all time is he didn't paint everything. Go to the portrait of his studio, his Juan de Pareja, the black portrait of the black.
You going way ahead? You want me to go way ahead?
No, it's not way ahead. It's not way ahead. Keep going. It's just it's like keep going. One more.
Oh, this one.
So this is Juan de Pareja, who was a slave when Velasquez brought him into his studio, and mixed race, black and Latino, and Velasquez trained him, and then as a portraitist, got him a career, and then freed him. And the next image, which we don't have to look at, is a work by Juan de Pareja. This piece is in the.
Well, now I'm curious. Okay.
So that's a Juan de Pareja. So that's not a Velasquez, but that's his student. That's Juan de Pareja.
That's the slave guy?
Yeah, that's him. That's him.
That's his work right here.
Painting. That's his work.
Dang, he got good.
And it's not in great condition. It's very dark. It's dirty. It's not well. So it's not a fair work to him. It's hard to find a good Juan de Pareja that's in great condition. But this is a great example of, this is so sparse as an image. The background, there's a very restricted palette. I mean, this is just like if you were to look at the palette of the painting on the left, there's some like, there's some vermilion, I guess, that he's got in there, and it's not even the whitest of whites.
Simple. It's almost monochromatic.
It's crazy, and Velasquez just knew when to stop. And it's almost like you said, they go 100 years, and for a lot of that, it's like, what can I do with this? And they do all these crazy things, and they do everything in great detail. And then Velasquez is one of the first artists who says, I don't need to use all this arsenal.
I don't understand how he did it. I mean, I'm sitting here as a painter, 500 years later, and I still struggle knowing when to quit. I still always push too far. I mean, his level of restraint and sophistication was just miraculous at that time.
It was unbelievable.
I don't even know.
Especially when I mean, go back to that portrait of the king. That 2 more over.
By him?
The other way. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, you were it's right there.
Right here. Oh, the other one was.
I mean, you're doing a king, and you're leaving a lot of this as sketchy as it is, and doing the droopy eye. And to me, Velasquez is to me the king of restraint. He's just.
And you know what people don't understand, which is so frustrating, is this garment was harder to paint than this garment. And when I say that,
That's
I don't mean
interesting.
in time. You know, it's if I told two people, okay, I need you to get from Salt Lake City on foot to Denver, right? That's a 10-hour drive. On foot, I want you to go from Salt Lake City to Denver. The guy who walks there and gets there in a week might say it was harder work because it took him a whole week, but another guy who sprinted there and gets there in a couple days, he's the one who did the more impressive thing. No, granted, he got there in a couple days. So it might, to people who are there, like, oh, look how hard this guy worked. It was a whole week of work. Nonsense. This was done quicker,
Yeah.
but it was so much more difficult to do. And people just don't get that, especially in this day and age with
Yeah.
all this eye candy on social media. It's like, this is so hard to do. Man.
It's and you know what? I don't know if portrait gets better than the 17th century when he's painting than the mid 1600s. We're going to go to a different region.
Okay.
So go to the little girl. Well, you know what? Not the little girl.
girl?
Go two over from where you are. Go to all the figures one more over than that.
Oh, I gotta
That
get
one.
rid of all these. Hold on. Getting out of control. This
So
one
this
here?
is Rubens, and this
Okay.
is exactly what Rubens is known for, being over the top. And Rubens was the senior artist to Velasquez, and Velasquez was influenced by him. They knew each other. Rubens is kind of the prince of painters at this time, and he's dominating. He's doing the most portraiture of pretty much anyone of this time. And this is a diplomatic image. We talked a little bit about it in our Rubens. I'll just give a quick reminder that he was sent by the King of Spain to go to England, who they're at war with, to help stop the war that was going on between the two countries that had gone on for decades. And Rubens paints an image that's a portrait of Charles II. He's on the right, looking over his shoulder
Okay.
in the top of the painting.
Right here.
And he's wearing armor, and he is in the middle of a war. And in the background, you see the figure of war, that woman that is, and you also,
This one?
she's holding the armor. No, it's
No.
the one who's holding his shield.
Oh, that's a woman?
That's wisdom. That's a woman. That's Minerva.
Okay.
In armor. And then there's another figure over his right shoulder.
This one?
That's the figure of war and terror.
Okay.
And what Rubens is trying to do is he's trying to say, look at what the world could be like. Look at the plenty and the peace over your shoulder. And he's got portraits of the king's children who are right behind the king. And he's got these kind of mythological figures that have got the horn of plenty and the playful leopard. And it's a weird allegory for us today, but at the time, it was Rubens trying to use this painting as a diplomatic gift to say, let's stop with the war and let's look at peace and plenty and what the future can be like if we stop fighting with one another. But this is Rubens using portraiture, his portraiture. He worked up this painting in probably a few weeks.
Whoa. He finished it in a few weeks?
Few weeks. He worked faster
How
than
big
almost
is this
any
painting?
other artist. It's about 6 feet wide, 5-6 feet wide.
Oh, come on.
Now,
That
remember, he
can't
has a
be
studio.
real. Oh,
So remember, he has a studio. So he's got a studio. He's got like 300 artists who work for him.
okay.
And Rubens would kind of sketch out on an oak panel. Usually he had lots of oak panels and maybe 2 or 3 colors, what he wanted a composition to look like. And then he would have a lot of artists who would work up most of it based on his other work that they'd done for him before. So they knew what a satyr looked like. They knew what a leopard looked like. And they would work it up to most of the way. And then Rubens would come in and finish off the faces and the hands for the most part.
Still crazy.
And and by the way, his right-hand assistant at this era was Van Dyck. So, I mean, it's not like, I mean,
Who was a better painter, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, and let's look at just a Rubens portrait on its own. That's the next one, this little
Okay.
child. This is what Rubens doing a very quick portrait looked like. This is like a one-day Rubens portrait.
Okay.
And he deliberately kind of idealized figures. That's what they wanted. And this is something that's important to know about him, is that, you know, Rubens, he's living at a time when he's basically running a factory,
Mm-hmm.
and he has studied more than any other artist at the time, all the artists of his era and before, because his first job is working for the Duke of Mantua, who hires him to do copies of Titian, Raphael, Veronese, Tintoretto, um, everybody who's like the great. And these are artists that are like 20, 30, 40 years older than he is. Some of them are dead, some of them are still alive, but in their later years. And he's a very good mimic. But he also perpetuates this style of kind of like in a war-torn Europe of the healthy, fat child and woman.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't like that today as an aesthetic. We look at it and we think of it as like it looks kind of like too idealized and fake. It's the fat women we don't like.
Mm-hmm.
But his real brilliance, I think, is in composition and in storytelling. His the woman who kind of he was looking at as a model is the next image. We won't talk a lot about her, but her name was Michela Vautier.
Wait, that's
And
her as a
she's
little
just-
girl?
No. That's Rubens' daughter, I think, is that image that we were just looking
okay.
at. But the woman, this is a self-portrait of Michela Vautier, who Rubens looked at as a model for how to do portrait paintings. Vautier was commissioned by the middle class for the most part. She was a major figure in portraiture at the time. There's a major exhibition going on at the Royal Academy in London right now. We're kind of rediscovering her. The next image is another example of her work of portraiture. But it's good to see, she's the one who maybe more than anybody influenced what Rembrandt and Van Dyck become with her palette and the way that she handles oil painting. You could argue that she's kind of like the mother of what Rubens and Van Dyck become. At least that's the current art historical argument.
Do you know anything about her history? Does she have some sort of deformity in her hand, or is that just...
That's a style choice.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah.
Huh.
It's a they would do that kind of like, they call them ballet hands sometimes in the 19th century.
No, but I just mean her knuckles look swollen or something weird. But I'm not being critical. I thought maybe she actually had a deformity.
Look at the anatomy of the next painting. The next
Okay.
painting's also by her.
Well, that one's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can see Van Dyck in this. I can.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
And that's
Man, that hand
Vautier
is
is her name.
beautiful. That's a beautiful one
Yeah.
right there. Sheesh.
We don't have a lot of examples of her work, but then you go to the next image, which is
Yeah, this
is
is my this is my favorite
this-
portrait of all time right here.
this is, and it's tiny. I mean, it's just like less than 10 inches by 10 inches. And the man that he's I think it's Peter Gertz is the subject. Gertz is this the patron of Rubens when he was a young man. And Rubens takes Van Dyck over to him when Van Dyck is like 18 to 20 years old and says, "Hey, why don't you paint a portrait of Gertz here? He was my first patron. Maybe he should be one of your first patrons." So this is 18 to 20-year-old Van Dyck painting this image. And then if you want to contrast it with something, there's a 40-year-old portrait of 20 years later Van Dyck doing a self-portrait.
Yeah.
So
He reminds
mean,
me of Michael
you can-
Klein. Do you know Michael Klein?
yeah,
He
yeah,
totally
he kinda
reminds me.
does.
He's got that same look to him. I don't know. It's awesome.
Now Velasquez and Rubens and Van Dyck are all painting at about the same time. And what all of them have in common is greater confidence in oil painting, and they all have different focuses, I think, in what their skills are. Maybe that are a little different than one another, but there's more naturalism going on than and there's just more confidence in their ability to handle form. Right? It's almost like their geometry is better than Titian's was. It's every generation gets a little more confident.
You know what's strange though about this? I know no one's absolutely consistent. And I know we've talked about Van Dyck a lot, or we had a whole podcast on it.
Yeah.
But This one, when he was 19, is more sophisticated, and he's more bold with paint and piling on the impasto than he is at this age, where it's very thin. I mean, right down to the canvas in some areas. I mean, it's
And
still
who
a
knows if it was like
genius painting.
is it a taste choice at the time?
That's
Is it a
what I'm
style
wondering.
issue? I don't know.
But to me, this
I don't
seems like they
know.
seem like reverse. It seems to me that this one should be the later one. Don't get me wrong, they're both brilliant. But this one to me
Yeah.
feels just a little bit less brilliant than this one. It's
I
just so
I don't
strange.
think you're alone. I think if you were to have, a group of experts who didn't know, they were experts in painting, but they didn't know when these two were done, a lot of people would not say that the other one was 20 years earlier. They wouldn't at all say that. And the level of confidence that he had when he was in his, late teens, early 20s is just mind-boggling. I mean, you kind of wonder, like, did he have help?
That's what I'm wondering. But to who?
Did
No
he
one was
like?
better than this.
Well, I mean, Rubens
Rubens
doesn't
couldn't
get a
do
fair
this.
shake all the time, but Rubens, I don't know. Maybe he was looking at Schneider's, maybe it was Garrett Dow. I don't know. Maybe who knows? Who knows?
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a mystery.
let's look at the next artist. The
Whoops.
next artist is Rembrandt, and this is young Rembrandt in his early 20s.
This is awesome. This is my favorite painter.
You know?
Well, one of my top 10, I'd say.
And then there's Rembrandt in middle age that's right next to him. And
That's Rembrandt portrait. That's not a self-portrait.
that's not a self-portrait.
Right.
And you and I talked about this a little bit.
So good.
The thing that's changing, and it's not a technology issue. This is a taste issue and an audience issue, because who you're painting for also matters when you're doing a portrait. Rembrandt is living in probably the wealthiest age in the history of humanity in the Netherlands in the mid 1600s or 17th century. They've got the Dutch East India Company is bringing things from all over Asia. The Dutch are extremely wealthy, and there's this flowering of commissioning works of art. And Rembrandt is painting people they're called tronies. He has a bunch of costumes. He's pulling people off the street, and people want in their home as portraits, middle-class people, they want images of just what humanity, of what interesting people look like.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've got he's not even painting biblical figures all the time. And with the name of this is Old Man in Armor with a Feather Cap. But he could have been a mythological figure. Sometimes they say, oh, this is a portrait of Hercules, or this is a portrait of so-and-so or so-and-so. They don't even care what the people look like. Look at the next image. It's by Adrian Brouwer, who was a famous portraitist.
What?
Who was working in the and one of the things they love to do is they love to do just silly pictures that were hanging. This is a multi-million-dollar painting by a contemporary of Rembrandt. And it wasn't valued for its accuracy. It was valued for its playfulness. You would never, Velasquez would never do this painting. Rubens would never do this painting. Titian, Raphael would never do this painting. This was now portraiture of everyday people, everyday subjects, and even ridiculousness that was going on in this era. And that was, some of them were not even technically remarkable pieces. They were just valued for, it was almost like they'd gotten good enough at painting that this was their equivalent of having social media. You could go to an artist, pull a face, and he could actually do somebody pulling a face. You couldn't do that with tempera. You couldn't do that with early oils. But you could hire somebody in a few days to do a silly picture of your uncle with a pod on his head pulling a face.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's going on here. I'm not bringing it up because it's a masterpiece, right? But the next one is almost like that. The next one is, we know this is the Franz Hals and the Laughing Cavalier, contemporary of Vermeer and of Rembrandt, and this is now a celebration of the virtuosity of the paint itself. I mean, he's going like over the top with strokes. This is Franz Hals is not prolific, but he's considered one of the greatest portraitists who ever lived. For me, when I look at a Franz Hals, the portraits are almost never as interesting as the costume. The
I
costume's more
agree.
interesting to me.
I don't think he's the greatest who's ever lived. I think
And that's what
portraits are somewhat relative to Rembrandt and Van Dyck and Velasquez. His portraits lack breath. They lack life.
look at the next one too. This is like there are only 40 that were ever done by Vermeer that we know of. And we we really there are reasons for honoring and loving Vermeer. But in comparison to Rembrandt and Van Dyck, who were his contemporaries, even in comparison to Franz Hals, portraiture and likeness and naturalism are not the point in his work. And there's a certain virtuosity to what he's doing when it comes to how he's controlling the values and the composition of how that light is falling on the head and all kinds of things. But portraiture starts becoming at this area, it's not about likeness always. It's not about virtuosity of, wow, that really looks like me. It's almost like painting starts becoming a symbolic act. It's a symbolic portrait. It's an idealized portrait.
What do you think about Vermeer?
The girl with the pearl earring.
What do you think about?
What do I think about him?
Well, I mean, obviously he's the only one that we know of for sure that used a camera obscura. At least I think we know for sure.
We don't know for sure, actually.
We don't?
We don't know for sure. No, we don't know for sure.
Well, when I look at it, it reeks not lens distortion, but like lens aberrations. And it just, to me, feels like, I mean, a lot of people are probably going to disagree with this, but to me, it just feels like a blatant tracing of an slightly out of focus projection from a camera obscura. I've never been a huge fan because of that. And you see that in a lot of his more complex works too, where you see things that happen to because of lenses, that weird distortions and aberrations and weird highlights and all that kind of stuff. And he copies it. It's all there.
I'm reading a new book on Vermeer that's really fascinating, and I'm going to reserve this conversation till later. But I will say this: that I think that when I think of Vermeer, I don't think of him as a portraitist. I think of him as an idea man.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
And so I think that to me, the great contribution of Vermeer to the history of art is the concepts of his works. Not necessarily that. I mean, if you think that he's living in a place where there's this huge variety of Rubens, Van Dyck, Rembrandt, Franz Hals, Adrian Brouwer, the Snyders, all Vautier, all these interesting artists are going on, and he's doing his own thing in that environment. That, to me, it has value. He gets sucked in by our modern era as a portraitist. And I wanted to include him in this because I wanted to show just how different his portraiture is than Van Dyck, who, in my opinion, Van Dyck is the most serious portraitist out of all this group, along with Rembrandt. Rembrandt and Van Dyck, who have very different approaches, they are the purebreds.
Well, I'd throw
but
Velasquez
for some
in
reason,
there too.
Yeah, and we group all of the group everybody else from that era, and we say, oh, Vermeer was a portraitist, and I want to say, he did people, but he wasn't a portraitist, in my opinion. He did people, but he wasn't a portraitist. The portraitists were, it's just they were playing different sports. He was playing a different sport, and it shows up when you look at how this face compares to somebody else. Now, we're gonna move on. We're gonna move on a little bit, because what happens is the French take over. The Dutch, the Flemish, which is that Holland, Netherlands area, they're controlling for most of the 17th century the conversation in art. And then the French build Versailles. And this piece that comes up next by Rigaud,
that is
considered
wild.
It's Louis XIV, the most powerful king in Europe, at the height of his power. and it is an over-the-top portrait, and it's the most expensive portrait of the end of the 1600s. And this becomes the style that dominates. This kind of like, it's almost like a cartoonish Disneyland version of portraiture. And the likeness is hardly the point. What's the point is the ermine cloak, the the architecture, the like it's 12 feet tall. It's going back to Titian in a way of like it's a projection of power, and it has less to do with the artistry of a work. And there are artists who kind of take it up. Go to the next two portraits.
Can I just say
Unless you want
something
to say
about
something
this real
about it.
quick? Yeah.
Yeah.
Two things. One, oh my gosh, that to be able to paint this, all these materials would just be a blast. I mean, that is remarkable.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
the
yeah.
other thing is, what year would this have been painted approximately? Don't need an exact year.
1680s and 90s.
It looks like it's lit with theater lighting.
Oh yeah.
How in the world? So this either had to been done in post, for lack of a better term. In other words, he would have had to apply the principle of tenebrism deliberately in the painting.
Yeah.
I don't know how it would have been lit this way, because no window is going to project light like this. I suppose
he would have
unless
been
the sun
available.
was direct.
He's available. He's aware of what Caravaggio is doing, who had died 30 or 40 years earlier. And so he's seen that kind of like that high contrast work that's going on. And I know the king isn't posing for this the whole time, right? So like
Yeah.
the king comes in, he does his face, then he has either a mannequin or he has a model that's like the same size. The king was a dancer, and part of being at Versailles was dancing. And so that's very impressive. But he absolutely could control the conditions of this. I'm sure he had glass, mirrors, reflectors that amplified light to make these effects.
Yeah,
There's
because
no
these are
doubt in
hard.
my
Look at
mind.
these are hard shadows. That's either direct
Very hard
sunlight,
shadows.
because it's not artificial. So
Yeah.
that's remarkable. If that's the case, and he's
Yeah.
chasing the sun and only painting a couple hours
Probably.
a day.
Probably. You're probably right.
Wild.
And you know what? Like this isn't our taste nowadays. This has been bred out of us. But boy, is this an over the top amazing image. It's just not our taste, right? It's like it's hard for us to get into this. And there were artists who were downstream of this who were doing royal portraiture. Go to the next image.
That's not your taste. I've seen you wear heels like that.
I know. You know, I just don't want the image shown everywhere. So this is what French portraiture becomes. So this is Lebrun, who's Verger Lebrun, who is one of the most sought after portraitists of the early 18th century, the early 1700s.
Uh-huh.
And she's a female portraitist who well, I'm doing actually it's a little later than that. Sorry, she's mid to late 1700s, but she's in this French tradition, and her contemporary. This is her working for. This is her self-portrait, and she's working for the French court, but she's only doing women. And this is what the men are doing on the other side. Is the next artist.
This one. Before I go, this one.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is about it, but when I first looked at it, it didn't appeal to me. But then when you zoom in and look at these
isn't this the sweetest
charming
part of the whole
faces,
painting? Oh
my gosh! It just
those
sucks
really
you
are
in.
the most. They're the most beautiful parts of it.
Look at those women's faces. They're so beautiful.
Especially the one in the very back. There's just
Mhm.
such a sweetness and tenderness to it. Oh,
Yeah, I love that. My gosh.
it's
Anyway,
so
okay.
beautiful. And then this is what
Whoa.
the king is having himself painted as. And you can see that it's an actual direct reference to Charles V by Titian. But it's in the French style of the era. So it's the giant 12-foot portrait of the man in armor on the horse. But it's done in this almost hyper color.
The horse looks like it's made out of
by the-
plastic.
And this is what the French taste does. So I mean, look at what's happened to us. We've gone from Velasquez, Rubens,
Feels like you're going backwards.
um, um, uh, uh, Van Dyck and uh, and Rembrandt, which is all a version of naturalism, to now almost a fantasy portrait that's being done again. And you're right, it does go backwards, but now they've got 3 or 4 more colors that they didn't have before. This red comes from the New World,
Yeah,
comes from an insect in the New World. The blue is called Prussian blue, which is a new chemical blue.
is that Vermilion,
These
the
are
red?
two of the. It's cochineal,
Mm,
which I think is it's the same color that's used in Coke cans and lipstick today.
mm, okay.
And it's one of the more, and the blue is Prussian blue, which is the first chemical color that's invented in the, and they start using it in the skies, and everybody kind of develops these hyper colors. They're not interested in earth tones anymore. But holy cow, look at that leg, the armor on that leg. Isn't that incredible?
Yeah, there's no
And that
question.
boot?
There's some awesome stuff in here. But it's so one thing I can't help but to notice is there's still, I mean, this was typical of the Renaissance, like with Michelangelo, for example. But that's a very androgynous woman right there. I mean, that arm is like a dude. Is that
The artist
typical of
who's
this period?
yeah, and the artist who's they're actually looking at for this, I think, is Tiepolo. We're going to
Hmm.
talk about Tiepolo,
Yeah.
and Tiepolo was you're absolutely right. There was this idealization in this, and angels weren't supposed, they were supposed to be unsexed.
So that's the
They were
point. That's
supposed to
why I was
be,
asking. So this is
yeah,
supposed to be androgynous, mysterious
yeah.
gender. Okay.
So skip 2 images ahead.
Okay.
So this is a technology we
Oh,
didn't get to talk about. This
that
in
dog.
the late 18th century,
Uh-huh.
the French and the Swiss really start exploring pastels. This is pastel.
So beautiful.
And they're able to get a softness and a texture in pastels that is shocking. It is so, when you see it, and we really don't have many well-preserved examples of this because pastel almost always, when it's exposed to light over time, just like fades.
Oh,
You
that's
you
sad.
can't preserve it. So I wanted to show this, but I also wanted to show what these pastel drawings, under drawings, look like. Because the next image is Lyotard's um uh
Uh-oh. Hold on, I'm lost.
let's see, we go back. No, it's now all the way over to the left.
Oh, here we go.
That's the drawing. So this is what his under drawings look like. And then he does the workups with many layers of pastel over time.
Wait, this is
And
the
for
base of a pastel or a
that's the
study
base of a
for a
pastel.
pastel?
This is the base of one. This is an unfinished one. This is the
No
base of one.
joke. I wouldn't have guessed that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so if you put these side by side,
Okay.
yeah, same artist, and the image is just off screen to the left. Yeah.
Oops. Ah, sorry. There we go. Interesting.
You're
Man.
seeing the same artist who's working it up. Lyotard was his name. He was I believe Swiss. I would say that for every oil painting at the end of the 18th century, 50 pastels were done.
I've been doing Jeff's online mentorship program for about a year now, and it is awesome. Everything is online, super streamlined. If you can be there, I mean, you have the ability to talk to him once a week and he can review your work and help you. If you can't be there, it's pre-recorded. You can go back and even re-watch things if you missed something during class or couldn't be there. So the online portion of it is almost better than real life because you can always go back to it, which is awesome. The demos are recorded. It's just like all available whenever you need it. And I'm a stay-at-home mom of 4 and my time is limited and it's also very interrupted. And so to be able to go back has been clutch for me. And you get to work with Jeff HEIN, who's awesome. He's tough. The assignments are simple, but difficult, and they're difficult to make us all better. And he's able to give us these assignments, coach us through it, help us stay excited to progress. And so it's just been a great experience. I am so grateful that he has been willing to take time away from his own art to offer all of us to have it. So if you're thinking about doing it, it's amazing.
To learn more about how you could have me as a personal mentor, check out the link to HEINatelier.com in the show notes or video description.
So, like I said, for every, one oil painting, 40 or 50 pastels were done at this time. Pastel was really the medium of portrait.
Do you know if
For
pastels are
most,
still really fugitive, or have they gotten better? Because I know a lot of
that's a
artists who
good
use it
question.
now, and that's a shame if they're all going to just fade to nothing.
It's a good question. I don't know. I think that, one thing that we do now is we do have like a glaze and a preservative we throw over the top of them
Plus, we have
that keeps
museum
them
glass
slightly.
now too.
Yeah, and we have museum glass, so I think they're a lot better. But I mean, when you look, he was really one of the greatest of his era, and when you look at how good pastels could
it's
get,
beautiful.
really is. It's something that I don't think we realize how good they could get in their era, right?
No, Daniel Keyes, who you probably met at the Portrait Society. I
Yeah,
don't know if he does pastels and paintings, and sometimes on the internet you can't even tell them apart.
I
It's
think
pretty
that
remarkable.
pastels have always been considered a lesser medium, and they've always been considered for women, almost like watercolors have been for a lot of people.
Hmm.
And and uh, and I don't understand it. I mean, I guess I kind of understand it because it was, you know, oils were before the oil tube was around. You'd have to be in a studio with a bunch of men who were mixing paints on a regular basis. And so it was considered kind of a rough audience. And as a woman, you wouldn't mix socialize with men unless under very specific circumstances, right? And so it wasn't seen as a safe place for women to be in. And pastels, you could just, you could buy and do it at your leisure. You didn't have to have
Hmm.
oils. Same thing with watercolors. But boy, I think that if you can get these kinds of results with pastels, it's just as flexible of a medium as oils are in some ways, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's gorgeous.
So one thing we've kind of like we haven't talked about yet is the Grand Tour portrait. And boy, we could go forever on this. But this is Pompeo Batoni. And Batoni had, I think he had 8 children, and he lived in Rome. And if you were a wealthy person, you would go on what was called a grand tour in Europe in the 18th century. It was considered part of your education. You would maybe leave London or Paris or Copenhagen, and you would travel throughout Europe to the principal sites of Rome, Italy, even Greece, in order to understand culture and history. And it made you a well-rounded person.
Mm-hmm.
There are elements of that today that we have. Like, we consider it a liberal education to go to college and you learn about the basics of philosophy. Well, you'd go to Pompeo Batoni's studio. There were others like Raphael Mengs, or Anton Raphael Mengs, who is another artist who was his competitor. And you'd literally sit for a portrait for a few hours. And then you would choose the costume, you would choose the pillar, the classical statue, or the work behind you of classical like architecture. And then you would maybe get entertained by the Batoni family. They would hold a recital for you because his kids were all musicians or artists. And they would play for you while your face was done. And then a year or two later, you'd get through the equivalent of their mail. You would get a portrait, and just put up the next 3 images side by side.
Okay.
The next 2 images side by side with this one.
Oh, it's
Notice
all
how
the same dude.
it's these are all different people.
Oh, they
Similar
are?
costume. Yep.
Holy cow,
Different
they look the
background.
same.
Yep. And you would have and these were called Grand Tour portraits. And yeah, I could put up 150 of
Wait,
these.
they're
and they would
really
all-
different people? Am I crazy?
No, they're all different people.
Wow, they
they're
could
all
easily. Well, I guess they are a little different. Yeah, I guess they are. But man, they look very similar.
So the Grand Tour image is when portraiture really starts to explode.
Mhm.
I'll give you one more example, and then, buddy, we should probably cut this short for the day because
Yeah, we'll do a part two.
a part two because we're going to see an explosion. But I want to show where this kind of leads is the next generation of artists who take on this work of grand tour work and then make it their own. Joshua Reynolds is the president of the Royal Academy. And this is a grand tour style portrait that is painted in London, which is unusual, right? So this is now, you had to get a portrait of this quality, you would have had to go to Italy or France. Now the skills are in the end of the 18th century, beginning of the 19th century, academies are becoming a thing. It's no longer individual camps of artists. Now education is spreading throughout Europe for how to do large scale painting, and it becomes a whole nother game of how portraits are
good, man.
taught. And we'll talk about this as part of part two. So maybe this first part should be titled, Raphael to Reynolds, right?
We're at the late 1800s now.
Now we're
late 1700s.
1700s. And we'll talk about how portraiture explodes in the 19th century. But as a cap to this, this part, what we've seen is, this is the summary.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen the technology go from tempera to oil, from oil on panel in a small scale to oil on canvas. And it's mostly portraits of powerful people that are being done. We're seeing confidence in oil paint be increased. And then we see this kind, and in the meantime, the Northern Europeans and Holbein have way more confidence in their oil skills. We just briefly visited them than the Italians did. And then what we start to see happening in the Netherlands is we see this whole other crowd of people who are making portraits. It's not just the wealthy, it's the middle class that are getting portraits done. And there's also a dramatic increase in the confidence of oil. And that also has its effect on royal portraits in Velasquez, in Rubens, in Van Dyck, who aren't just painting to the middle class. Some of them are, but they're all painting with a restraint, and they don't have to do everything anymore, right? It's more about naturalism and observation, and their skill level is, they're even pitting themselves against Raphael. Then you go to the middle class painters of Rembrandt and Frans Hals and Wattier even, and they're all doing crazy experimentation and skill levels with the medium that's different than 100 years earlier. But then they go out of fashion as the French get into power, and the French bring back over the top, powerful portraits that are almost fantasy exaggerations of work again. And the Grand Tour portraiture is part of that. It's part of the exaggeration and projection of power. And portraits are done in a way that, portraits are still a luxury item, with the exception of the pastels, which are the middle class version of it. And what we're going to see as we go into our next lecture is the democratization of the education of these skills. Now it's not just a few artists who are painting, it's thousands of artists who are painting. And we're going to be seeing the top 1% of portraiture over that era. I know that's a lot to digest. It's a lot to digest, buddy.
Yeah, that's okay. That's exciting. And the thing I got from it, which is so fascinating, is how quickly oil painting peaked. Within 100 years of it being invented, it sort of peaked in Spain for the I think Velasquez, Van Dyck as well. And then it just sort of went up and down, and it went flashy and unrestrained to restrained and sophisticated to flashy and unrestrained to restrained and sophisticated, back up and down and up and down. It hasn't been an upward linear path.
Yeah,
At all.
it's almost like, you know, like, is it now about like skill level, or is it about style choices at this point?
That's what it seems like. It seems like it's just trendy. It hasn't
interesting.
really progressed in skill in a linear fashion at all from what we're seeing today.
Yeah. So I'm down for part 2 anytime you want to do it.
Let's do.
Honestly.
Can you do it next week?
I could.
All right,
do it
let's
next
plan
week.
on it. Everyone's
Okay,
gonna
buddy.
be waiting. All right, great to see you again, man. It's always
Thanks,
a
man.
pleasure. Have a good one.
Feelings mutual. You too.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Undraped Artist Podcast. If you enjoyed it, subscribe. And if you could, leave a comment or review. That really helps the channel. Please share the show with your friends, and if you're feeling generous, consider a monthly donation at theundrapedartist.com. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next week.